Hi, everybody. Welcome, Prefect people. My name is Laura. If you haven't been to the stream before, welcome to it. But for those who have been on the stream before, basically, welcome back. I was gone for a while. I actually was moving cross country. So I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. So I was pretty busy then, but I'm super excited to be back. Plus, perfect timing because the super awesome Orion announcement went out on Tuesday, and I got to take it for a little spin. And I want to show you what I think is cool about it, and hopefully get everybody else excited about trying it out too. One other little housekeeping thing though, there was definitely a lot of technical difficulties today getting this stream set up, so I'm kind of in a different setup than usual. So if something goes crazy or if I drop for some reason, do not be alarmed. It is probably my HDMI cables. That being said, if anything like that happens, I'm recording this so that I can upload it later. But all the prefect peeps are in the chat, so they'll be there to hang out with you too, and hopefully everything will go smoothly. But I did want to make a disclaimer just from how many HDMI cords I truly did go through to try and make this perfect. Cool. So another part of it is that my notes are awkwardly over here, so I'll be looking over there occasionally. But all of that aside, the goal for today is to show you what Orion is all about. And I think this is a great time for people who are new to Prefect. It's also a great time for people who already use Prefect because Orion is, I mean, you're going to see it, but it's just like super easy to use, really well suited to sort of the normal data science, data engineering workflow. And I think a lot of people are going to like it, and a lot of people are going to want to move their flows if they already have their flows in like Prefect 1.0 into Orion when the time comes. And then on top of everything else, this is a great time to submit your feedback. So if there's something you're messing around with it, I already sent some of my thoughts along myself. But if you're trying to do something specific and you can't do it in Orion yet, or you don't know like how it possibly could happen later, this is totally the time to bring that up. So for those reasons, I think this is a super exciting time, and I'm really happy that I could show it to you all. Yeah, so I guess first off, let's even just talk about what even is Orion. And I'm going to switch my screen so you can see um, everything up here. Um, so this is kind of like the next generation, second generation of Prefect. If you go to prefect.io/Orion, you can see this very cool website with all sorts of information about it, and also links you to the docs and the code for it. But basically, the difference between the Orion sort of design principles and what the Prefect design principles were is to kind of take the best things that we've learned, that have been learned from data engineering over time. Prefect did that, in its slot of time. Orion now can benefit from everything that all the Prefect users have told the Prefect team, and that the Prefect community has contributed into Prefect. And Orion is very much about getting it easy, making it easy to start. So making it easy to start both in terms of like if you already have code that you want to move over and you don't want to like really change it a ton just to try out this new platform. And also easy to start if you are building stuff from scratch, or if you really want to self-host. Orion is a great self-hosting option that's just a lot easier, um, simpler to sort of reason about, and also is going to be a lot easier for the Prefect team and the Prefect community to build on top of. So I know I'm like really excited about it for everybody. But yeah, so those are kind of like the main things here, I guess, that are really hitting on it. And there's a whole blog that Jeremiah posted. Where did my link to the blog go? I thought I had it open handy. But there is a blog that I lost the tab for in some process and at some time here. So I'll have to link that to you later. But there's a blog that Jeremiah wrote that kind of also explains the design principles behind it and everything I was just saying about how now is the perfect time for feedback. Giving an early release like this is very, Prefect style to try and get that early feedback back from everybody. So that's why it would be really awesome if everybody gave it a look after they saw what it's like today. So another sort of big aspect, which will be showcased through the demo, is that it separates out the concept of sort of the flow orchestration code that you need to add in to make, things happen in the order that you want, and the deployment code that actually makes it configurable in a, very I guess like Python first kind of way, configurable all in one place. But those two concerns are a bit more separated. So I'm actually going to show you an example really shortly here, where I did the minimum amount of flow moving in a stream last year. And we're going to do that again basically today for this demo and see how much less we have to put in to get even like a ton of benefit out of it. And for the people who are Prefect old hats, I also want to highlight that you can still you'll still be able to use all the great Prefect primitives that you love. There's a bunch of stuff that's already in this technical preview. I'm going to show you like caching today, and I'm going to show you versioning today, and I'm going to show you, some other stuff that doesn't really exist in prior Prefect, I guess, too. And one big sort of highlight, I think, for the people from before is that there's a really first class way to handle subflows. So this has been asked for, pretty much constantly. It's been slowly integrated, I would say, into Prefect 1.0, like 0.15 started putting a lot of stuff in there that made it easier for you to like transfer data between tasks, data between flows, but it's more in like the task paradigm. So you're going to see how that's a lot easier now. So that's one more point to make before I show you is that for this technical preview, it is a technical preview, right? So not everything is working, not everything is done. That's also why it's a great time for good feedback. So some big like limitations, I guess, right now is that pretty much everything is local file system bounded right now. So there's some work going on, probably literally right now, about making it easier to deploy to different environments. But that's what I'm going to be demoing to you today, just the local setup, because that's what's available in the technical preview, this week. And then I'll let the Prefect team notify in the chat what's up with timelines for anything else. Okay, I went through all my little things I wanted to make sure I said before, so let's do a demo, right? All right, so this is the repo from a stream I did pretty much this time last year. And this is what I'm going to use as the basis for the demo. So if you go to the Prefect Orion docs, there's a bunch of tutorials in here. Oops, click, 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 there we go. There's some tutorials in here that you can use to get started. Here we go, link to friendly tutorials, right? So here, first steps, it will take you through a couple, little bite-sized pieces, building up pieces of a flow or, in different situations kind of. But I wanted to see if I could take the same, bit1 legacy script that I had from before and layer all these things on as well. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And I think probably the best way to do this is just to slide on over to my demo notes and give it a go. Okay, so let's head to Visual Studio Code. All right, so I'm gonna just briefly show you the end basically of last year's stream, right? So what the purpose of last year's stream was to take some like shell scripts basically and say, if I wanted to take these legacy shell scripts and put them into Prefect, what do I have to do, right? So I did that whole stream last year. And if I go to this flow.py, this is kind of where we landed. So this looks very like typical, I guess, of a Prefect flow, right? Because we have a task here. We have this with flow, blah, 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 with a bunch of configuration in here that describes the DAG, right? So this is like the order of operations, how things should go. And then down here, we have either a flow.run call or a flow.register call. So my flow is named F. So right now it has like the last state that it was in, which was a register call. So this was all about taking like these sort of like capstone, like shell scripts, kind of make a capstone like flow object that represents everything of what order they're supposed to happen in, and like put all the good prefect stuff in it, right? So that we had a bunch of other like logging and extra things that we added in, parameters, so that we could do some cool prefect and prefect cloud stuff. And I super want to highlight the task decorator right up here. I super want to highlight this flow context. Um, and I also want to highlight that there's a map in here, right? So these are all things that people who are used to Prefect will already recognize. So, and the register, as I mentioned. So these were all pieces that you kind of had to put together if you wanted to like dynamically fan out tasks. You needed to use this map, this special map construct. If you wanted to just run it, you use flow.run. But if you wanted to register it and like see what was going on in Prefect Server and Prefect Cloud, you needed to register it and then run it from that UI or ad hoc. So those are kind of like the state of the situation before, right? So Orion is a bit different in some of those aspects that I highlighted. So I mentioned one big idea is to get out of the way of your code. So if you want just the minimal amount of things that you inject into your code, but like lots of benefit, Orion was super designed with that in mind. Some cool things about that is it makes it easier to move your legacy stuff just to get some basic benefit. It's easier to like iterate your development over time, add more features in without needing to like figure out a bunch of configuration before you get really get what you want, I guess. And I mean, I think everybody wants to specialize in their application code, right? They don't want to necessarily specialize in like a ton of different frameworks. They want to get to whatever your domain specific thing is, whether you're a data scientist or you're doing some special data engineering or what have you. But adding another framework on can sometimes be a little intimidating. So I think Prefect 1.0 are really, I mean, now it's 0.15, but will eventually be referred to as Prefect 1.0. Definitely had a measure of doing a lot of things without a lot of configuration, but Orion is kind of like the next level of that, right? So it's definitely meeting that. So let's take a look at that, this idea of like, we don't need to do like a ton of setup here to get some benefit out. So I'm going to switch my branch. Let me go over here. I have one called Orion Technical Preview. Great. All right. So I've backed my repo kind of back here to in a world, right, where we're back where we started. We just have some Python in here, right? And we want to turn it into just a flow. I think I'm on the wrong branch actually. I want to be on just preview. Git checkout Orion Technical Preview. Let's see. Yeah, I don't expect all of that to be there. Spoilers. Let's see. Yes. Why is my VS Code not in the same state? Orion Technical Preview. Please hold while I check my branches, right? So exciting. I am on this branch, but my VS Code is still on more flowy. We're going to start them over. Let's open this one. I want to show you the code, it doesn't want, it's shy. We'll see how it goes. Okay. Let's open it directly from here. And if this doesn't work, I can switch over to Sublime Text. Might be a little, if VS Code is not playing today. You can reopen, it says. Let's open Sublime Text, which I have open over here with all my secrets. Oh no, I want to open a project, this one. All right, let's give up on VS Code, even though it has the most beautiful theme. So sorry, don't have the best theme, but we're gonna come back over here. All right, let's see if we're in the state that I wanna be in. We're still in the future state, so let me make sure I'm here and check this out. Okay, so I think I just maybe rebased it too far, so I'm gonna send it back real quick. So this is kind of, was going to do this later, but basically I have, similar to last year's stream, I have this example that's going to go step by step, and you can see the changes per commit, right? So you could walk through this yourself if you wanted to later. So I think maybe I just didn't have it, like I already had rebased on this branch, I guess, even though I thought I saved it. So that's fine. All right, we're back. So here we are at the very beginning of the situation where I have these three Python files, right? So let's orient ourselves first. I have these three Python files. One of them has a function that's called do all the machine learning, which reads some files, does some transform features, creates a linear regression, and save to DB, which are functions themselves, which are in these other files, right? So inside this machine learning.py, it's a linear regression is the name of the function. And inside this manipulation one, we do some like Panda stuff here to transform the features, and later we save the model file to the database, right? So here I've done the like minimal amount of changes to our do all the machine learning.py, where all I have put in here that is prefect related is from prefect import flow. And then this thing, which is a flow decorator, right? So for the oldies, this is different, right? We used to do flow context or instantiate a flow object and edit that flow object. But instead here we've got this flow decorator, and you'll see later why this is super exciting. But this is the minimal type of stuff that we've done, right? So what we can do with just our flow code, in fact, I'm going to delete this first and just show you what it's like when it just runs on its own. So I'm going to go over to my terminal again, and I'm going to just use normal Python to just run what is basically some normal Python, right? Just this do all the machine learning.py file. I'm going to pass it a file name because that's what it needs to accept from the command line. That's the argument that we need to send in, right? So this is just normal. Do all the machine learning, I believe I called it data0.json, right? And so if this was just your script chilling, like this is the normal output of the script, which is apparently complaining to me that something is going to change in pandas later. So I'll have to watch out for that later. But if I do put in from prefect import flow and put in this flow decorator, then if I do this exact same thing, right, run the same code, and I have to save it also. Save it first, right? Don't have my VS Code autosave anymore. Then you'll see that the output looks a little bit different, right? Because this flow wrapper has now wrapped this all into Orion, right? So among the things you get with Orion is a lot more logs because it has the Orion logger that kind of takes over. They're formatted in a certain way, and it tells you some other stuff about other things that it's doing. So all this stuff wrapped around, these are things that this Orion system is doing for you and getting it set up for you. The logs are just like evidence, I guess, of it, because you put that flow decorator on it and nothing else. So what are some of the things that we got? So you'll see this in the tutorial too, but if I drop into IPython and run this not as a script, but instead call this function from inside a Python interpreter. So I'm going to import do all the, or actually from do all the machine learning, import do all the machine learning. Oops. Yep, there we go. Then you'll see this in the tutorials too, but I can grab the result of calling this function, right? Because it has this flow decorator. Oh, I also need to go to file name, right? I said I needed to before. Okay, and then because we have this flow decorator, this object that we get back is actually this prefect Orion state type, right? So this is similar to states that you might have experience with previously in prefect. This state object is what sort of captures all of the metadata about if this run succeeded, right? So there's properties of these states that you can check out, like their name and their message. You can also check out the result if the flow function returned anything. You can also check some other like state information about it, like is it canceled, is it completed, is it failed? So the state object is a little bit more rich than just running your script by itself. It can tell you a little bit more about what's going on, right? So that's the super basic, right? Just put a flow in. And to hit it even a little harder on what we get for our trouble of putting this flow decorator on, I am going to start the Orion services, which is possible with this prefect Orion start command. So this is going to start up a couple things, especially the UI, which is going to be at this location, localhost 4200. So I think I got a tab for that over here. And if I give it a refresh, you'll see that this flow that I ran before has been tracked. In fact, both of the flow runs, one time I did it just as a script, and one time I did it inside the Python interpreter, right? So Orion wasn't running before, like I just did prefect Orion start, but it was tracking this information. So the reason that this sort of all works here from an Orion services perspective is that the Python client interacts directly basically just with the state database. So I have a SQLite database going. You could use Postgres if you wanted to too. And so anytime you run a script that has, or any function, any way that you run a function that has a flow decorator on it, the prefect or Orion client, I guess, is going to mark the information of the state transitions and the uh, graph dependencies in the database that you have configured for your Orion. And in most, in these early cases, or in like if you're just running stuff locally, or even in some production cases potentially, you can just use SQLite, and it kind of just works out of the box. So the nice thing, if you can kind of imagine here, is that if you're just running like script after script and you kind of like get confused of like what you ran before or like what happened, you actually have this orchestration system that will fully track all of that stuff. And all you have to do is put that flow decorator on your capstone function. If you do that, it's already tracking everything. You can filter everything, you can view everything, you can look at the timelines of how things ran, right? It's already tracking all that metadata for you. So I think this is pretty cool. I've heard tales of people, running a bunch of flow code and then being like, oh, I should check out what the UI looks like. Spin it up and being like, wow, how is it listening to me, right? So yeah, it's just that the design splits up uh, the the way that the database's state can be maintained can be handled solely by the prefect client, and the rest of the services that come with the Orion API don't need to be spun up in order for you to benefit from that. So that is like the first super cool thing. Just put your flow on and you'll get to see it in your UI if you want to. So let me move on to my next little notes here. Oh, I want to show you how to use the Orion. I'm going to have a hard time with prefect and Orion apparently terminology with the Orion client from Python specifically. So everything that you see in this UI is powered by this API that you can use from Python itself. So everything that you want to inspect here, you could also inspect it programmatically or for whatever reason from your Python interpreter. So I'm going to show that. I'm going to let's close this down because it's listening anyways, right? And drop myself back into IPython. And I'm going to show you the Orion. Oh, wow. Orion. There we go. Client. I'm going to show you the Orion client, right? So you can instantiate an Orion client, and this now is able to basically communicate with that state database using all the API methods that are on this client. So one of which I'll just show you right now. Let's grab it. C read flows, right? So this is just going to pull all of the flows that this state database knows about. So you'll see that I have this flow called do all the machine learning, right? So it knows that this flow exists, it knows what this flow's ID is, it knows some other metadata about it, right? That's the type of stuff that every time you put that flow decorator on, it knows to record these things inside the Orion database, whether you're using SQLite or Postgres. And then you can use this Orion client anytime that you want. You'll see that the Orion client is asynchronous, right? So I threw this await on so that it would actually give me back this just right here in this one line, right? So that's also exciting for the people who are waiting for async support. Orion's got you, but I'll save that for another demo because we're just going to do the basic stuff today. Okay, and I think the next thing that I want to show you is just some more flow stuff that we can add on, right? So cool, we can add like at flow and it's tracking stuff, but let's get some more prefect stuff in here, right? So to do this, I'm actually going to let my rebase continue because I've organized these by commit. So I'm adding here a new flow object in a new file called poll data. So I think I mentioned earlier that my original thesis, I guess, of the stuff I'm turning into Prefect and now Orion flows was these shell scripts back here, one that's called 12 hours and one that's called 24 hours. So the idea behind them was that the 12 hours one runs some common stuff every 12 hours. The 24 hours one has some extra stuff that it only does like at the top of the day, right? So we need to do the 12-hour stuff twice a day, but the 24-hour stuff, we need to do like this poll data step first and then do everything else. So I'm going to now take all the stuff from that sort of 24 hours shell that never made it into Prefect version from last year and pull it in here so that I can show you some other cool Orion stuff. So I've got this new function called get data. It's just going to pull data from like this gist. I just like put some stuff there. It's going to print out grabbing data to let us know that it's doing it, right? And I have this function that I just called main that is decorated with flow, right? So overall, still super basic right now. I'm just like I'm just making another flow on top of my machine learning flow that does the data pulling. And I haven't really done anything besides put this flow in here. So I'm going to run this, but it's going to fail for a reason that I'm then going to, fix with Orion, right? So this one's called pull data, and it takes an integer of how many data files it should pull down. So we'll just do this. All right, so I told you it was going to fail. Here we are, right? You'll see that my problem is that I have a type error. String object cannot be interpreted as an integer. So when I run this from the command line, it takes something just simply off of sys.argv. It just takes that one argument that I passed in. And as you know, those are always interpreted as strings, right? And I didn't do any typecasting by the time I passed it along to my main function, and I immediately tried to call the range function on it, which doesn't work on strings, right? So old school, we would need to throw some int conversion in here, right? Like maybe here I would say like items is int items, or maybe I would do it before I even pass it. But the cool Orion part I want to show you is that you can actually do this with type hints. So I'm going to save this. You'll see that right here where I have the name of this argument that I'm expecting to be passed into main, I put this other structure here saying that I expect this to be integer type, right? So make sure I saved it. I did. And then we're going to run it again. And we'll see that it cheerfully tells us, right, that it is grabbing data and doesn't throw an error at all. So what's going on here is that Orion already ships with Pydantic type hinting and coercion out of the box, right? So as long as you throw this flow around here, as long as you have put all that prefect wrapper around it, one of the nice things you get for free without having to do any other configuration is this type hinting. So I actually hadn't really used Pydantic much before at all, and here you can see it, it's very simple syntax and it's very clear for primitive types, but you can also define Pydantic models for like any object. So you could like come up with your own object and you could do Pydantic validation using those models that you described. So this can actually get really powerful for you depending on how complex the data is that you're passing along to your functions. You can already see like, oh, it's kind of nice. I didn't have to throw this like int everywhere. Also, I only have one place I need to change it now, but you can just imagine that there could be a lot of places that this gets coerced into an int. If you're like serializing and deserializing different places, kind of having a hard time keeping track of that, right? So it's a lot cleaner and easier to both see this at this level in the function signature, and that typecasting is going to happen on your behalf anytime that it kind of needs to enter the edge of this function. So super easy, super nice. I think that's a cool one. That's just like a really easy, nice to have that comes with Orion. So let's talk about the next thing. So let me stash my change here and continue my rebase, right? And that just adds my type hints in fully, and then I'm gonna continue again. So the next thing I want to show you is some more configuration that you can add on. So we can just add this flow decorator, but we can pass in some other metadata, basically, that's going to make our flow easier to query, for example, with the Orion client or to see on the UI, right? So before it was just named after basically the function name, but we can be a bit more precise about what we want to call our flow. And we don't need to tie those two things together by passing in this name keyword inside the flow decorator. So I did that both here for this pull data.py, instead of having it just be called main, which is very confusing and meaningless, right? But I could leave this function name the same and just change my flow name here. And I also did it over here for my flow called do all the machine learning. Previously, now it's just called machine learning instead. So you can call them whatever you want, right? Configure that at the flow level. And the other thing that's kind of cool that you can edit yourself, which is kind of a difference from original Prefect, is versions. So you can track the version of your flow and pass in whatever version that you want. So this needs to be some sort of string, right, in the end. And in my case, I'm pretending that I have like a git hook or something that's going to set this environment variable, git commit SHA, every time I make a commit or change repos. And since I've set this to grab that environment variable, the version that will be set both against the flow in my state database and therefore in the UI and in any queries that I make is going to have this version number on it, or hash really. So let's actually take a look at that. So I'm going to give this a run first so that like it's happened once in this format, right? So I want to pull one of these, and then I'll start Orion again. See how he's doing, right? So here you can see that I have this prior flow tracked back when it was just called main. You can probably imagine how annoying that would get if you had a lot of them just called main. But now I have this flow called pull data, right? And this one called do all the machine learning. I could run that again as well. Maybe we should start up another terminal. I need a conda. I thought I had a second terminal, but I must have closed it. Activate Orion. All right, let's get another one of these going. Make sure I have all my my database set up because I specified a specific database connection. Oops. Okay. And I will run my other flow. There we go. Make sure I'm in the right place. I'm not. So I need to, let's switch these so that Orion is running in this other one. There we go. So in here, I have this do all the machine learning, right? So this is the one over here that now has this new name, machine learning, instead of this name, do all the machine learning. So I can execute this, except I forgot to pass it my file name again, right? So let's do that correctly. And then if we head back over to Orion, you'll see that it recognizes this as a flow name, right? So here we have all the flows at the top level, right? And then here we have all the flow runs. So these are all the individual runs that we actually have caused to happen with one or more of these flows. So this one that I just ran back here, we can kind of cross-check. It had like this randomized name independent mantis. That's this one right here, right? That's associated with this machine learning, the flow named machine learning. And finally, the part that I wanted to show you was that this flow knows its version, which is the commit hash that I had in my environment variable at the time that this flow was run. right? So I think if I look at some of my older ones, I don't know which one's old, probably this one, you'll see that this is what kind of like a flow version naturally looks like, right? So this is a hash that is sort of a best effort computation on the code of your flow, and it should change every time that your code changes. So this can be kind of like a sort of automated way to track if at least the flow code has changed. But if you want to do something more specific, so like in my case, I wanted to use git commits because that's more meaningful to me than just if it's changed, at all with any character, then this is what you can do instead, right? You can set your version to be whatever you want. So I think versioning is pretty cool. It wasn't really easily exposed in prior Prefect to kind of use that to your own ends, I guess. So it's definitely a bit easier to use now and make it be more meaningful for you, right? Make it a git commit hash, name it after like a branch, name it after a environment like dev or staging, so you can know some stuff about that. Okay, next thing I want to show you. I said subflows earlier, right? That's the magic word. So let's make a subflow. Secretly, I was doing all this work to have this pull data flow, and which is decorated with a flow, right? And my do all the machine learning.py, which is decorated with a flow. So I can show you that I can put these both together and it's no big deal, right? We can just totally do that. So I am going to uh, continue my rebase so I can get my next, oops, I have to spell continue though. Continue to my new one for subflows. All right, so what has changed is actually quite small change. It happened so fast, maybe you can't see the difference, but I have imported do all the machine learning into my pull data file. And in my flow, that is called pull data here by name, I call that function, right? Not a big deal, right? I just call this function. And on top of that, you'll see that I get some results, some value from my get data call. I'm just passing along the file name. And I can just pass that right along to something over here, which is itself a flow. So, for the new people, this might be like, oh yeah, that's like totally, it makes total sense, right? But this was a bit harder to do the way that like Prefect 1.0 was engineered, right? Because the task was kind of the composable unit. Flows weren't really the composable unit. So there were definitely some big updates that made it easier for you to compose your flows together. But this here, I think you can just see it, right? It's so natural to just drop this function here and treat it like, yeah, we're just going to pass this data down to this function. That's like, that's all the great feeling of data dependencies that we got from Prefect 1.0 with task data transfer. And now it's just as easy to do your flow data transfer in Orion. So this, if I actually go, let's go run it over here, right? Whoops, we're going to run this pull data file, and I'm going to remember to give it an integer. There we go. So we'll see in this output that it's going to start this flow run fabulous cuttlefish for pull data and do the stuff that we're used to. And then it's going to begin a subflow run named hidden mastiff for this flow machine learning. So they are two separate flows, flow runs. In fact, from the UI, we'll be able to see, I forget what they were called already. Fabulous cuttlefish was definitely one of them. Yes, fabulous cuttlefish and hidden mastiff, right? So here we have fabulous cuttlefish. I could go click on this, see what's up. Hidden mastiff, I could go click on this, see what's up. You could, inspect them separately in the UI. They're totally their own thing, but it was really easy to compose them together from the perspective of your script, and you can just pass data dependencies between them like it's no big deal, right? So I think that's pretty exciting. Subflow people, you've arrived, right? Now is the time to do all the subflow stuff that you wanted to do before. So I think this is going to unblock a lot of people who didn't want to do as much configuration before on the solution for Prefect 1.0, or just had something special that wasn't going to work in that case. This is going to make it a lot easier, right? So there is the way that kind of this works in the back end. The models that track flow runs actually store a lot of attributes on the parent flow run and the child flow run to be able to track back between the two of them. So there isn't a super great API way to do that right now, and there's not a super great way to see that in the UI yet. So there is this subflow runs, button, but it hasn't been developed yet. But the fact that this even exists to track them together, right? This isn't something that existed in Prefect 1.0. The fact that it's already established in the attributes of these objects that they know how to get to each other, it's just a matter of time for the Orion API to make it really easy for you to investigate your subflows without, tracking through different attributes. So, hopefully in next stream I can show you that, or we can all just get in a room together and make a bunch of subflows and see what's up, right? But I think this is especially a place where the folks who wanted subflows, this is a great place to kind of put your feedback and see if it fits your needs. So definitely check that out. Okay, next one I want to show you is caching. I love caching and I love results and I love data dependencies. If you didn't know it before, you know it now. So I'm pretty happy that this has made it in the technical preview. So I'm going to continue again so I can show you all about caching. So let's see, let's reorient ourselves, right? So we're still in this pull data file, right? Where we like to get data and we like to iterate. We now have a subflow in here in our normal flow. We already saw that last commit. We thought that was cool. So the new thing here is that, let's say that this get data command is really expensive, right? And if you already got the data for today, you don't want to do it again. In fact, this is very similar to sort of the original situation with the shell scripts. The reason there were two was because we would do, it once a day. We only wanted to pull the data once a day, right? So the way we did that with just shell scripts and cron was to have the 24-hour one work on that schedule and the 12-hour one not do the data pulling. But it didn't really know, right? Like it wasn't smart enough to know, like, did the 24-hour one finish yet? Is like any of the data corrupted, et cetera, et cetera. So in this case, a different way that we can do this instead of just scheduling two flows at different schedules and like hoping that they're going to finish in time is that we can actually throw in this caching instead. So the way that you do this with Orion is to pass to a task. So if you have a task that you want to cache, you can pass in a cache key function. And so in this case, I'm passing in today's data cache function, right? So that's up here. And every cache key function should take these two arguments, context and parameters. So context has right now some very limited context that's related to the prefect wrapper, like what is the flow ID, what is the flow run ID, the task run ID. Parameters is whatever stuff you sent, whatever arguments you sent into this function in the first place. So this is a very useful thing for you to potentially cache on, right? Because if you're doing this for one value of an argument, maybe you only want to cache that instead of for a different value of an argument. In this case, I'm using it, it's a little squished, so let's do this. I mean, it's kind of long, but basically I'm checking to see, does the file I expect in the format that I usually make it exist for today's date and for this integer that I'm trying to get data for. And if it does, then I can just use the cache from before. I don't need to pull it all again. So to showcase this working, I'm going to run this twice since I've just, rebased up to this commit where this cache key function exists. The first time it's going to actually run, it will say that it's grabbing this data, and then it will cache that data at the end. The second time, it will check, do we already have this data? And since it already does, then it won't do it anymore, right? It will use the cache data instead. So let's do this, right? So our first time here, we see our big grabbing data. It's very excited to do so, right? And then we're gonna do it one more time. And we'll see that it doesn't yell out to the rooftops grabbing data to us. And in fact, if we look closely in here, right, you'll see that when it kicks off the flow pull data, to do this get data task, it actually finishes in the state cached, right? So it knows that it has a cache that it can use, it uses that data instead, and that's what gets passed along to the downstream tasks instead. So, similar to caching in Prefect 1.0, there's also a expiration that you can put separately. You could, definitely encode it somehow, I guess, in your function, but you can separately add in another key that's the cache expiration if you want this to be true only for some time delta. In my case, that probably wouldn't really be here since I already have encoded some information about the date in my cache function. But that it definitely makes it easy to use if you just want to, if you want to burn through the cache in like an hour or every 1 minute or whatever the case may be. So that's caching. Really happy that it made it into the technical preview, so definitely use that. All right, I've got 2 more big things I want to show you and 15 minutes, and I need to take a water break here. But let's see them. The first one is sort of like a whole new thing for Orion, which is prefect futures and basically manual orchestration rules in your flow code. And then I'm going to show you about deployments because I told you before that deployments are different. So we're going to do those 2 things in these last 15 minutes here. So let's continue our rebase, right? Futures and manual orchestration is what we're going to take a look at now. Okay, so I've left everything else in here. The big change that I want to show you is down here. Right here, you'll see that in our flow, in our for loop here, we're going to try and get data for every integer I. And previously, we just would then do all the machine learning. But instead, you can write in your flow code, write some Python that checks, what the results were from an upstream task, and then decide conditionally using just normal Python conditional like for loops and if statements and just all the Python control flow logic you're used to. And just right here in the flow code, make a decision about whether you're going to do this or not, right? So previously, in a prefect flow in the DAG, there was definitely some dynamicism possible, but a lot of this type of needing to check whether I should do something or not do something needed to happen in a task and then needed to be passed downstream for other tasks to interpret. Or you needed to do some crazy stuff, raising different types of signals that could be combined to determine like how other tasks were going to proceed forward or not. The new version here is just do it in the Python that you love, right? Just do it with the control flow statements that you're used to, right? So you definitely can, wrap this type of logic in a task somewhere else, but the add-on for Orion is that you don't have to, right? You can do it right here inside your flow. So there's basically 2 important sides of the object that you're going to get back that you need to understand in order to be able to do this. And that's what this .wait method here and this .result method here are about. So when this get data function is executed, this thing that comes back here, this file name is actually a prefect future, the object itself. So a prefect future may have not finished yet, right? It might have a state like running, right? But it doesn't have its result yet. It hasn't finished happening. And this is great because everything could be happening asynchronously, right? They could all be happening at different times. You could be checking the state of things while they're still happening. But if you want to wait for that result to be finished, for this task to be finished so that you can actually check on that result and see, what you want to do next, you need to call this wait function on the future, right? So this is basically going to block here for this upstream task to finish for the purposes of within, just this flow code, you can check on the result of that upstream thing and do whatever stuff you want to do right here in the flow code to decide if you want to proceed. So I made up this random thing that can not work or does work in my specific situation. So this result itself is a file name. It's in this specific format that I designed up here. So if it has the number 3 in it, which is not happening today, then we should do all the machine learning. So right now, this is a situation that I don't expect to proceed, right? So I expect none of my file names to have this number 3 in it. So therefore, this do all the machine learning subflow shouldn't occur. So we can give that a go over here. And we'll see that right here in this logging, right, it's going to start off trying to do pull data. Cool. It's going to pass this get data task to the executor. Cool. It's going to be cached, right? We learned all that last commit. And then it never gets to this line of code, right? It never gets to line 30 because line 29 already blocked it, right? I already made a decision about should I kick off this subflow or not based on the results of the prior task. So I can switch this to something I know will work. There's definitely going to be a number 0 in there. And so we can run this again. And we'll see our subflow actually does occur because line 30 is actually going to run, right? We do all of our pull data stuff, and then it begins the subflow run because it actually gets to line 30, the same way that you're used to experiencing with your flow control, right? In Python, it's not so difficult to reason about of like, is this going to run? Is it not going to run? What like states am I depending on upstream? What is my reference task, right? Like that was a great way to do that within the state paradigm that existed in Prefect 1.0. But in Orion, it's really easy now to just do this right here inside your flow. So as long as you remember about this wait and this result, then you're just able to do this right here in your flow. So I've got a little FYI down here. This is also called out in the docs. If this task, right, if this state here is failed, then calling its result under normal circumstances will raise an error. So possibly you want that, right? Maybe that's the situation that you want, and that's totally fine. And you're cool with this whole flow having this failed state because you threw an exception at this point. But if you don't want that to happen, there is a argument you can pass right in here. Oops, made too many parentheses, but you can change, this to not raise on failure, right? So that's up to you. It depends on your situation if you care about that or not. But that's just one big thing to highlight. If you're spending a bunch of time putting a lot of waits results everywhere, if you've got some stuff stacked up that's failing upstream and like your result like can't be, it makes sense. The result is not there, right? It failed upstream. But if that's the case, then it might be like one extra troubleshooting step for you if you don't otherwise catch that exception to know like what exactly upstream thing caused your downstream result to not be available, right? So just throwing that out there. Cool. Okay, so the next thing, last thing really here I want to show you is deployment. So let's quickly continue my read base, right? And look at an interval schedule. Yes, let's reload it. Great, deployment. Okay, so I need to open back up my side view here because one of the big things about deployments in Orion is that it's this totally separate other thing. So I have this deployment.py file. It creates a deployment spec, and I'm going to call a CLI command to create this deployment based on this deployment spec. So some cool things is that people working over here in pull data who kind of maybe like don't care about like how it's going to get deployed later, they don't need to add all of this extra configuration inside this flow code or otherwise have some sort of like weird way that like this the like config module imports like the flow for like the actual deployment. It's this first class kind of separation of concerns where you don't need to set a lot of that configuration on your flow itself. You'll instead set it in this deployment spec over here. So this, I think this makes it a lot easier to kind of keep track of what config like really matters at what level, right? So at the application, at the application level, application code level, maybe we don't really care about that. But when we actually need to get this, running on some cloud provider or on a schedule, this is kind of a other type of concern than the base code itself. And now it is separated into this other file. So deployment specs, pretty simple. It needs to know where the flow is. You can give the deployment itself a name. You can target what flow you want to want this deployment spec to be relevant for. So this is important because if you have like a subflow going on, just like interpreting this file, the way the deployment actually, does some of the stuff it does is it loads this file to like inspect the flow object. And if you have a subflow in here, it's like, hey, you have two flows. Which one are you trying to deploy? I don't know, right? So you can tell it explicitly here in line 8. I say I want to do the pull data one, not the machine learning one, which is a subflow. That will be run when this actually executes, but from the perspective of the deployment, it needs to know, which one, what is the top line, like capstone flow that you want me to be worried about. And then this is the place where you can add your schedule, right? So same with the Prefect scheduler, there's an Orion scheduler, right? And it takes a couple different types of schedules. Interval schedule is one of them. R rule schedules, which I have one example of that I'll like just quickly show at the end here, which is really cool. And then cron schedule. So if you are a cron person, then you can use that too. And the other nice thing that you can put on your deployments is tags. And let's go ahead and run this, create this deployment rather, and then I'll show it to you in the UI, but the tags can be used to filter. So let's see, let me make some room. The CLI command to create a deployment is called prefect deployment create, right? And then you need to give it the deployment file or wherever your deployment spec is. So in this case, it's in deployment.py. And so I'm going to execute this, and you'll see some output like this, right? It's telling me that it created this deployment, local dev deployment for flow pull data, right? Local dev deployment for flow pull data. Let me get back to Orion, maybe go home. See this tab here? This is the deployments tab, and now it has a big shiny number 1 next to it, right? Because now I have this deployment here. And in fact, all of these yellow task runs, they're yellow because they're in scheduled state. These are all the intervals for the next, I think it's schedules like the next 100 minutes or something. I kind of forget from the docs, but some time out, right? It's going to schedule in these intervals for me. So this is my schedule to pull this data. I said I wanted to do this only 24 hours, so this is not the ideal schedule for me. But for the purposes of showing it in the UI, you can see this is how the scheduler is working. So for your deployments and your schedules to work, you need to have Orion running, right? Because part of the Orion services that is running is that scheduler service. So some of these logs from here is, the thing that actually is checking what are my deployments, what time is it, do I need to schedule anything, and what's going on. There's another process in here that's like, what time is it, what had I scheduled, what's late, right? And we'll mark late runs. You'll see there's some stuff there too. So all of those are like pieces of this Orion stuff back here that includes the UI and all of those processes. All right, one more quick thing. Yes, about deployments is your deployment file itself can have more than one deployment spec in it. So, we're giving you a world where you can have flows within flows. You could have this deployment file that's tracking a lot of different deployments at the same time too. So you can kind of keep all of your config together if you want to, right? So that's another reason why, having this like name and flow name here, you'll see this one is targeting my local dev deployment, targeting my flow called pull data in pulldata.py. This deployment spec is targeting the flow named machine learning in the flow location do all the machine learning.py, right? Those are the two flows that we've been taking a look at. So this situation, I'm using R rules, which is a really cool type of scheduling that's based on an iCal standard. So instead of it being like intervals or even just like every Tuesday or Wednesday, there's a lot more details. You can easily like skip holidays or, kind of set your own like maybe company holidays or just do like really complicated things like only the like third Thursday if it's the 100th day from the last time or something, right? Like all sorts of crazy stuff, right? So there's a lot of cool examples on the rule docs, which is implemented in Python in dateutil.rule. But you can see here, I'm imagining a world where pull data runs every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But just the machine learning one, let's say like my source for my data doesn't drop stuff on the weekends. So I'll still do just the subflow, that's the machine learning one, to retrain for maybe I have some other data drop that I'm interested in. But I don't need to do like my big data pull on the weekends. So this is just a cool, quick. I mean, you can read our rule docs and see what's up, but I just want you to know that this exists because this is a really cool, change in the frequencies um, that you can set, right? Great. So it's right at 2. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to show you. I'll put this branch up so that everybody can take a look at your leisure. You can rebase through as much as you want. Hopefully this made it, seem that you want to try out Orion, right? Seem that you want to give it a go. You can pretty much just pip in or condo install it. There's some instructions on that on the docs, and then it's just really simple. Prefect Orion start and just throw a flow decorator on something, right? And you're already, doing it, right? So anyways, so I'm super pumped for Orion. I can't wait to see what's next. Um, I'll be hanging out on the Slack more now that I stopped moving too. And also, I'm actually on the way to KubeCon right now. I think a lot of other Prefect folks are also on the way or will be attending virtually. So you should definitely hang out with everybody either in person or on the interwebs while we're all hanging out there. So it's great to see everybody again, and I will see you again next time.